looking at notes O-2, find theta given a trig value. So in part 1, we're going to do some calculator review from notes M-3. So asked to find cosecant of 16.4 degrees in the calculator. Remember that cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So you would write 1 over sine of 16.4 degrees, so the angle stays the same. And then you would plug that in your calculator. First, of course, you would check that the mode in your calculator is degrees. And then once you check that, you would utilize the alpha y equals key and type in 1 over sine of 16.4 to get 3.542 when you round to 3 decimal places. Now remember, this is not an angle, this is a value, an x, y value, or a little bit of both, correct? So you do not put any kind of symbol attached with this. No degree, nothing else. So 3.542. Now on number 2, asked to find the secant of negative 5 pi over 3, you know you're in radians now. So in your mode, the first thing you'd want to do is change to radians. And then secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So 1 over cosine of negative 5 pi over 3. So when you have this, you would want to use the alpha y equals key twice. Alpha y equals 1 over cosine. Within there, another alpha y equals for the negative 5 pi over 3. And you would get the value of 2 in the calculator. So that's a refresher of how to do the calculator portion. Now let's talk about on the unit circle when you're doing it by hand, no longer with a calculator. So I've just drawn out the first quadrant of the unit circle, where of course this is 0 radians, this is pi over 2 radians, this is pi over 4, pi over 6, and pi over 3. I've drawn the associated points, or written in the associated points, 1, 0, square root of 3 over 2, bad news, good news, twins, flip-flop, and of course 0, 1. So remember that x goes with cosine. Cosine means x, sine means y, and then tangent is y over x. So I've gone ahead and I filled in the tangent for all of these angles because they will be the same every single time. So of course y over x would be 0 over 1, which would be 0. 1/2 over square root of 3 over 2 would end up simplifying to square root of 3 over 3. Of course, anything over itself, y over x would be 1, so that's 1. This y over x would end up being square root of 3 when you simplify, and of course, this y over x, 1 over 0, would be undefined because you can't have 0 in the denominator, so undefined. So we are going to memorize these just as we have these. Yay! Okay, so for part 2, find 2 solutions, state the answers in radians and degrees. So number 1, cosine of theta equals square root of 3 over 2. So this is asking what angle, what theta, has an x value, cosine, of square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so here's our plan to narrow it down. So narrow it down to 2 quadrants based on the sign. Okay, we know the sign is positive. Then find the slices. Okay, so when we're thinking about this, what quadrants could we be talking about? The x value is square root of 3 over 2. That means my x value is positive. Okay, that could only be the first quadrant or the fourth quadrant. I don't have any x values that are positive over here. So furthermore, if you're thinking x is square root of 3 over 2, of course that's going to be your pi over 6, but also your 11 pi over 6. So you're going to say pi over 6 or 11 pi over 6. Those are your 2 pieces of the unit circle that have an x value of square root of 3 over 2. This piece and this piece. So pi over 6 is 30 degrees, and 11 pi over 6 is 330 degrees. 336, hello, 330 degrees. All right, so this is our answer for number 1. All right, so let's look at another example here. So example number 2, tangent of theta equals square root of 3 over 3. All right, so first draw our unit circle. Think about what quadrants we're talking. So tangent, remember, is going to be your y over your x. So the y over the x has to be positive. That means they're either both positive or they're both negative. Both the y and the x are either positive or they're both negative. Now go back to your slices here. Where is the tangent square root of 3 over 3? So that's associated with our pi over 6 slice. So we're talking about pi over 6, or in other words, right here, the one closest, slice closest to our flat. So this is going to be our pi over 6, or in other words, in degrees, 30 degrees. Or what's this angle here? So this is 6 pi over 6, so this would be 7 pi over 6, or 210 degrees. All right, so next, cosecant of theta equals 2 square root of 3 over 3. So remember that cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So sine of theta must be 3 over 2 square root of 3, because these are reciprocals. So I reciprocated this. So then to clean this up, of course, I'm going to rationalize the denominator. So I would have 3 square root of 3 over 2 times 3, which would be 6. So of course this simplifies to square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so where is sine of theta equal to square root of 3 over 2? So go back to your slices. Where are the y values? Y, square root of 3 over 2. Okay, so let's talk quadrants first. So quadrants that we're talking about, because y is positive, would either be this quadrant or this quadrant. Not these, because y is negative in those. So, and again, looking back at our y value being square root of 3 over 2, that's our pi over 3. So it's our pi over 3. It's also our 2 pi over 3. So pi over 3, or in other words, 60 degrees, or 2 pi over 3, or 120 degrees. Aren't you glad you know this unit circle backwards and forwards? Those are our two slices with y values of square root of 3 over 2. So last example here. Cotangent of theta equals -1. So cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, but the reciprocal of -1 is still -1. So tangent of theta equals -1. So again, let's first think about what quadrants we're talking. So again, tangent is y over x. So y over x has to be negative. That means one of each has to be negative. So either x is negative or y is negative, but not both. So that would be in this quadrant or this quadrant. Because in this quadrant, both x and y are positive, and that would not make a negative. And in this quadrant, both x and y are negative, and a negative over a negative would make a positive, and we want a negative. So this quadrant or this quadrant. And more specifically, tangent has to be quote-unquote 1, but of course, because of the quadrant, it's -1. So we're talking our pi over 4 slices. So here and here. But in this quadrant, that of course is pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. Or in other words, 135 degrees. Or, so that's 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, which is equivalent to 315 degrees.